Warriors. So glad to see you all tonight. Happy Valentine's Day. Happy Ash Wednesday to those of you who observe. We're very grateful that you chose to spend this evening, especially on Valentine's Day, here with us at Moms for Liberty. My name is Kit Hart. I am the chapter chair for the Carroll County chapter in Carroll County, Maryland. I am, most importantly, a mother of 5, and I have been serving the national team as a training facilitator for a few months now. So I have been very honored to be doing these trainings with some wonderful professionals from around the country. Tonight, our training topic is the Right to Read Act, which, as you'll soon come to find out, is a bill that's been sweeping the country. It started in Illinois, and it will affect you at some point. So it's very good that you're here to be learning more about this bill. Before we get started, I'd just like everybody to note that there is a comment section to the right of your screen. Feel free to introduce yourself, ask questions, engage with other members, and just kind of be part of this conversation as we dive into the topic. We will be taking questions starting around 8:15, so about 45 minutes into the discussion. Dan would be happy to take your questions, so please just ask them there in the chat. And just as a reminder, we're all joyful warriors here, so I will be monitoring the comment section, and just be sure to keep a smile on your face on your keyboard and remain respectful of the other participants. Just a disclaimer before we get started, to let you know that this meeting is intended for private use only, and any unauthorized recording, reproduction, or distribution of this meeting, or any part thereof, without the express written consent of Moms for Liberty is strictly prohibited. This meeting is off the record and closed to the press. If you are a member of the press, please disconnect. Now, we are very excited to introduce Mr. Dan Kleeman of the World Library Association. Dan is the executive director of the new World Library Association. He's also responsible for state libraries and has been reporting on the activities of the American Library Association for almost 25 years. He has been sued in federal court twice by someone following ALA advice, and is currently involved in a state court lawsuit by a school librarian against parents who exposed her school library activities. So, without further ado, please welcome Dan.
Well,
hey there, Dan.
Hey there. Hello, joyful warriors.
Yes, welcome. So glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. This will be my second appearance with Moms for Liberty. I really appreciate you folks.
Fantastic. Well, it is very likewise. So we appreciate you and all the work you've done very much.
Yeah.
So with that, I'm going to exit the screen and I'll let you go.
All right. Tonight we're going to have a very important topic to talk about. We're going to talk about the Right to Read Act. It's also called the Freedom to Read Act. This act is spreading across states across the United States and federally. All right. It is a very important piece of legislation that it must be stopped. Why? Because it's written by the American Library Association. In every state that this appears, it's written by the American Library Association, even though they got a local legislator to write it up and make it fit the local state laws, whatever they may be. In New Jersey, for example, there's a bill S2421, and that is a bill that was on the schedule for tomorrow in Trenton, but is now put off for the night. And it is supposed to be the model bill for the American Library Association to use in other states, even though they already have a Right to Read Act in Illinois. That one is slightly different than this Freedom to Read Act here in New Jersey. They always have these great names for them, but what it really does is it really takes away a lot of the rights that parents have and makes it so that they can't even challenge, for example, school book anymore. So let's get specifically into what I'm going to show you tonight about this. Is my screen on? Can you see my computer screen? There we go. So here at the World Library Association, we just got started a few months ago, but go to worldlibraryassociation.org, and on the About page, you'll see that there's a Right to Read Act link. Go to the Right to Read Act link. This document contains detailed information on exactly what is wrong with the Right to Read Act or the Freedom to Read Act, also exactly what it is and why it's wrong. So that's what we're going to discuss tonight in the next half an hour or so, and then we'll take questions. All right. The Freedom to Read Act is proposed legislation that, if enacted, would deny communities control over their own schools and ensure harmful outside influence. Wait till I show you this harmful outside influence. But just let me show you the seriousness of what we're taking on here, right? If we lose the ability to find out what's going on in schools and challenge it, here's what goes on, right? The recent movie, The War on Children by the Starbucks, Landon and Robbie Starbuck, they spoke with a mother who lost her child to the trans agenda. But what does she say? Landon says, what would you say to parents that don't understand the serious results that can happen by not taking action to protect their children? She says, well, I will say to not trust the school, the principal, the school psychologist, because now they are working on this agenda. So I will ask the parents to get involved in the school. Go inside and ask them, what are they reading? Because now it's not math. It's not science. It's not English. It's going to be this ideology. This ideology is killing our kids. Okay? This is why this is an important topic that we need to talk about, because the Right to Read Act or the Freedom to Read Act ensures that parents no longer can go in there and find out what's going on or challenge it. So let's talk a little bit more about that. All right, there'll be no way to go inside and ask, what are they reading? This Freedom to Read Act isn't written by legislators. It's copied from the American Library Association. That's why it's in all the different 50 states. It's already been passed in Illinois. It's the home state of the American Library Association. And what it supposedly does is it defends diversity and inclusion. But what does diversity and inclusion really mean? And right from the American Library Association, we find out what that means. Here is the head of the American Library, the top lawyer, the head of its Office for Intellectual Freedom and Freedom to Read Foundation. She's been there for decades. And she says, the thing that needs to happen most, and it needs to happen before these bills are introduced, is sustained messaging that, are you ready for this? Reframes this issue, takes it away from the idea that these are inappropriate for minors or sexually inappropriate for minors, and promotes them as diverse materials that are programming about inclusion, fairness, and the protection of everybody's right to see themselves reflected and their families in the books in the public library. They're saying out loud what they are doing. Okay? They're reframing inappropriate books, sexually inappropriate books, she corrects herself, as diversity and inclusion. And that is what is in these Freedom to Read Act and Right to Read Act legislation or proposed laws. It's literally foreign to every state. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but I want you to know that I give examples of where these Right to Read Acts or Freedom to Read Acts have been worked on by librarians for a long time, because this is kind of their goal to bring this about. So they've been forming these model libraries for all act, for example, the Right to Read Act. They've been working on creating this stuff and bringing it to state legislatures, and they have. The librarians would be the people to whom the Freedom to Read Act gives the sole power to decide what's appropriate in libraries. These same librarians who get the sole power under these laws to decide what's right in libraries, what do? They cover up child pornography crimes in libraries. Here's one such cover-up, right, from the Orland Park Library and right near American Library Association. This patron was accused of viewing child pornography at public internet stations. It happened a few times. Was the department called? Nope. Guys viewing child porn, don't call the library. In this particular library case, it took 2.5 years before they finally admitted that they indeed had been covering up child pornography crimes. They also learned when the library PR person went on the 880 WS Slam in Chicago, she admitted to the child pornography as well. That's when the American Library Association now trains librarians. Don't talk to the public, don't talk to the media anymore. Unless you're an expert, you know what you're saying, you never give any information like that out. All right? This is what happens. The American Library Association even arranged for an Intellectual Freedom Award. They love to give out awards. An Intellectual Freedom Award for the library that covered up the child porn. So there you go. That was intellectual freedom to the people who the Freedom to Read Act gives the power to decide what's inappropriate or what's appropriate for libraries. They're giving awards to child pornography. Even the head of the greatest leader at ALA, Judith Krug, said, a librarian is not a legal process. There's not a librarian in the country, unless he or she's a lawyer, who's in a position to determine what he or she is looking at is indeed child pornography. It's unbelievable. All right? And it gets worse. Well, let's look at specific librarians. Well, first, before I do that, let me tell you about this practice called fugitive pedagogy. This is the technique of, providing Marxist training without telling parents, communities, or school board members. As described in this article, here's a click. You can link, click the link here. Fugitive pedagogy comes to Florida. Socialist teachers actively break state law in the classroom. But specifically as to librarians, I am now going to break some news. I'm going to be breaking some news now. Of course, the news reporters were not allowed on. Too bad. I'll break it some other way. What happened is, the American Library Association funds and awards a librarian named Amanda Jones, who's so special to the ALA that she even wrote a book because she sued some parents for defamation because they said what she's doing in the school library. She sued for defamation and she lost 3 times, and now she's going to the Supreme Court because the ALA is funding this thing kind of secretly without anybody knowing. So she's come out and she wrote a book called That Librarian. So she is the model American Library Association librarian, along with Martha Hickson from New Jersey. We'll get to that later. She's the model. She wrote the book. So the person who wrote the book, and here's the breaking news. You wouldn't believe what she says here. Maybe I shouldn't read this all because it's a giant block of text. So read this on your own time. But basically what she says in here is, look, I'm in southern Louisiana and I have to be very delicate about what I say here because they're really not modern. Ha ha ha. But I'm going to teach, their thinking is still back in the 50s. But I'm going to teach them what I want to teach them anyway. I just call it mesh. I just call it a mesh. So she doesn't teach STEM anymore. She now teaches mesh. That has to do with ethics and social things and history and stuff. But ethics, sociology, history. But she's going to infuse it with social justice in there without outright teaching social justice. If you read between the lines of what I'm saying. Yeah, I'm reading between the lines. And so there's that. Then she tells them, she encourages them, the kids to read the book and then to write some kind of a stuff up on what they learned. And then, so what did they learn about microaggressions when they read New Kid? What did they learn about consent? These are kids in middle school. Consent when they read Maybe He Just Likes You. All right. And the rest of this, now here comes Amy Herman. She runs the school librarians, it's written right here, school librarians School Librarians United podcast. So you can go listen. Here's a minute at 39:11. They start saying what I have here transcribed here. You can click on this link and listen to it. And she's all into it. She's like, I think that's amazing. I think you found the way to thread the needle and do it in a way that gives your students the benefit of all the resources, and do it in a way that's not going to agitate or stir up, rile up your present parent base. You do it in a way that allows the kids to do some of this learning on their own. I think that's fantastic. Don't let the parents know. So that's, these are the librarians who are charged with deciding what books are going to go on in public and school libraries here in the United States, where states may be passing these kinds of laws. Now, if you haven't already heard, the American Library Association itself is led by Marxists. Right? Her first message as president of the American Library Association was to brag about the Marxism. I can't believe that a Marxist, that doesn't matter, believes that collective power is possible to build and can be wielded for a better world. Solidarity. I'm so excited. Well, guess what the better world is that the Solidarity person is building? The better world is the Freedom to Read Act and the Right to Read Act. That's your better world, where parents are no longer allowed to challenge things, and in fact, they get sued. So let's do an analysis. I go into an analysis of this act, which is supposed to be the model for the nation. All right. It's a law that denies communities control over their schools and ensures harmful outside influence is standardized. For example, it's going to say that the freedom to read is a human right constitutionally protected by the First Amendment of the United States. Well, yes and no. See, that's misleading, right? There was a Supreme Court case called Board of Education versus PICO. And that case decided, this is from the United States Supreme Court, not from the American Library Association, Chicago, Illinois, trying to push it on New Jersey and Virginia and Texas and everywhere else. And they decided that education unsuitable and pervasively vulgar books may be removed from public schools immediately. There you go. So don't tell me that it's constitutionally protected by the First Amendment, because in public schools, it's not, because the Supreme Court says it's not. So right off, the law is wrong. And then they talk about the Tinker and PICO case. And they talk about the PICO case, the use of a school library is free choice and wholly optional. They make it like, oh, it's optional. Well, they're misleading you when it comes to the PICO case. That's what they do. They want to mislead you. They don't want you to know what I just told you is the crux of the case. The other crux of the case is that schools cannot remove books for the ideas they contain, right? So if you're talking about, say, Marxism, and you don't want kids to have that idea, you can't remove the book. But if it's pervasively vulgar or educationally unsuitable, then you can, all right? So actually a school in Florida removed a book called Vamos a Cuba. It was sort of about Marxism, but it was really educationally unsuitable. It was removed. The ALA sued to stop that, and they lost. And so you can remove educationally unsuitable books from schools, even ones that are Marxist, or maybe ones that are trans, maybe, because they're educationally unsuitable if they're just not, Let's go to, then she says, and then the law says, school library media specialists and librarians have been targeted, harassed, and defamed for providing young people access to library material. That's not true. They're not defamed, harassed, targeted for providing access to library material. We all know that. Let's just move on for now. So essentially, the Freedom to Read Act is a law that makes it age discrimination to keep children from inappropriate material and sets up school and library media specialists as the sole arbiters. And to enforce this law, it constrains boards of education to do things. So boards of education are free to do whatever they like, but they have to do a whole list of things. And that whole list of things comes from the American Library Association. So they're very kind of like tricky about it, right? You can do whatever you want as long as you do what we tell you to do. And what we tell you to do is to do things like prohibit the censorship of library material. Acknowledge a school librarian specialist is professionally trained. Yeah, we saw that professionally training with Amanda, who's sneaking microaggressions and social justice on kids, and all the librarians are ha-ha, hee-hee about not letting the parents know that this is going on. So there's your professionally trained librarians. Establish a procedure for to review library materials. Well, there's a problem right there. The Supreme Court of the United States said the material can be removed immediately. There's no need to establish a procedure. You just remove it. In fact, some librarians have even removed it. I'm thinking, well, we'll get to that later. It just depends on the circumstances. This is just unnecessary in the law. They're trying to make it hard to remove inappropriate materials, which is what the American Library Association does. They've just put it into law. But watch this. Where does the Commissioner of Education get its model policy from? Well, it gets it from the State Librarian and the New Jersey Association of Librarians. Gee, where do they get it from? So their model policy will be coming from the American Library Association. This New Jersey Library Association, for example, we'll see later, is urging people to pass these laws. Gee, how unbiased are they going to be? They want these laws passed, and now they're going to write the model policies that they want passed in these laws. This is a terrible law. It's just setting up people to fail. And I guess what I'm doing here is making you aware of the specific language in these laws and the specific problems with them. All right? So they require schools to have book reconsideration policies and that school boards may decide what they like, except for these required provisions that include explaining why the board decided to set aside the review committee's recommendations. So it goes into a giant thing about how to set up a review committee, all designed to keep out the person who complained about the book so he or she doesn't get another say beyond the initial form that the American Library Association wrote up and the school modified for themselves. And it's like a fixed game. They fix the game. They require the Board of Education to do this. This is what's going on. And here comes the main purpose of the legislation. It's diversity and inclusion. The proposed legislation then provides its main purpose to force school boards to ensure school children have access to all materials without restrictions of any kind by using diversity and inclusion. That means one thing to ordinary people, but means something completely different to librarians, as I explained before, right, when they reframed the section of appropriate material as diversity and inclusion. All right. And it specifically states that this new law trumps all other laws, like Board of Education versus PICO. I mean, who do these people think they are? Notwithstanding any other provision of law to the contrary, a Board of Education shall, not may, shall ensure that each school in a district includes diverse and inclusive material as part of its library material. A Board of Education shall allow a student to reserve, check out, or access any grade-appropriate library material, including diverse and inclusive material. What does this mean? A book like Genderqueer, for example, we all know that this book is pervasively vulgar. All right, why? Because the relatively, there's a few pages that have completely vulgar stuff in it, not all of the pages, but it basically pervades the whole work. That's what pervasively vulgar means, right? We've all seen these pictures. We've all been kicked off of Twitter for repeating these pictures. TV stations can't even show them. Parents can't read them in school boards, but our kids get them. So these books are pervasively vulgar. But the American Library Association instead says, nope, this is about the idea of trans. And since it's the idea of trans, you can't remove it from the library, and it's diverse and inclusive. So this Board of Education is being required by this law to make Genderqueer and books like that available to school children. It's right here in the law. All right. The legislation then goes further to ensure that everyone gets the message that the librarians can do whatever they like, making it actually illegal to challenge the decisions of librarians. If the decisions are challenged in a way that makes the librarians feel uncomfortable, they can then sue the parents and get them to pay for their attorney's fees. A librarian shall be immune from criminal and civil liability. Why? Because the American Library Association wants that so they can more easily indoctrinate school children without pesky parents who have to be sued, like the lawsuit I'm named in right now. This gets rid of them. A librarian shall have a civil cause of action for emotional distress, defamation, libel, slander, damage to your reputation. Oh my God. This is like telling parents, hey, don't you dare even raise this issue, because if you do, we're coming after you. So get your pocketbook ready. So it'll be way better for you to just shut the heck up and sit down, because we're going to do this anyway, and we're going to sue you if you complain. That's what this says. And I'll show you that it is an intentional American Library Association tactic later. That's why this is in the law in the first place, because this is all American Library Association stuff. It is like the law of American Library Association called the Freedom to Read Act. What a nice name. And a librarian who wins such a cause shall be entitled to an award of reasonable attorney's fees and costs. Even I wouldn't bring a lawsuit under these draconian rules. I don't like a suit either. That's the whole purpose of this. How do I know that? Because the American Library Association trained people to file defamation suits. I'll show you soon. It's everything they want. Section 8 of the law then defines the terms used in a manner more favorable to a librarian's newly legislated right to sue parents. Diverse and inclusive material, for example, is defined in a way that excludes nothing. Anything goes. Heck, the former head of the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom once bragged that in one state, Alaska, anything goes. And Amanda herself, who wrote that librarian, was bragging about how anything goes. That's great. So let's look at the law. This is right from the law. Diverse and inclusive material means material that reflects any protected group. Material produced by an author, notwithstanding the author's membership in a protected group. And material that contains the author's point of views concerning contemporary problems and issues, whether international, national, or local. So basically, diverse and inclusive material includes everything, because this definition comprises everything. And it gets rid of the Board of Education versus PICO, educationally unsuitable or pervasively vulgar language. Because even if it's pervasively vulgar, like Genderqueer is, it's still about an author's point of view concerning a contemporary problem and issue, like trans and pronouns and things. That's what this language is. This is dangerous language. Harassment could mean a single act that is severe or pervasive, or a series of acts over time directed at a person that serves no legitimate purpose. Oh yeah, it's never a legitimate purpose for a parent to challenge a book in school. That's what they say, right? and would cause or has caused a reasonable person to suffer emotional distress. Oh my goodness. Let's look at what New Jersey school librarian Martha Hickson says about this subject of harassment. She said, the camera zoomed in on Hickson's face with foreboding music playing in the background. I felt very threatened, said Hickson. There's your emotional distress. Camera zoomed in on her face, foreboding music. She felt very threatened. There's going to be lawsuits galore under this law. This is going to be the biggest harassment of parents you've ever seen in your life. It's unbelievable. All right? Oh my God. Section 9, 10, 11, and 12 is basically the same thing applied only to public libraries. Section 13 rewrites an obscenity statute to add legal protections for librarians who would otherwise violate the law. Now let's think about that. They're going to add legal protection for librarians of the law of obscenity in New Jersey so that they don't get sued. That's what they're going to add. Does that mean that they are subject to being sued right now? Yes. Hurry up. File your lawsuits against these librarians. Sorry, but really, they know they're going to get sued for obscenity, and they want to make an exception for themselves because they're giving kids obscenity as it's defined in New Jersey. Right? Every state is different, and I'm not talking about the California versus Miller case of obscenity. I'm talking about how it is defined in New Jersey, right here, New Jersey Statute 2C 34.3. It does allow people to be charged with obscenity. It does allow librarians and teachers to be charged with obscenity in New Jersey. Use it before you lose it. But this law cannot become law because it will exempt the very people giving children obscenity as defined in New Jersey. It's crazy. It's like a wish list for Emily Drabinski, the Marxist leader who promised a collective action will be wielded for solidarity. Well, here you go. Section 14 rewrites the employment discrimination law to protect librarians from being fired for defying school boards or public library boards by making these books, these educationally unsuitable or pervasively vulgar books, available to children. So if you're a librarian who says, I don't care what the school superintendent says. Actually, that's like Martha Hickson. The superintendent told her to remove a book, and she told him to go fish. I'm not doing it. And she's bragging about how the school still has the book, right? She can be fired, but this actually would protect her from being fired, this law. That's crazy. It's going to make her a member of a protected class because she removed the library material from a school library. So that will protect her. They're just protecting themselves. They're not doing anything for children. They're not doing any reading for children. This is not a freedom to read for children. It's not a right to read, to make sure children get to read things, to make sure the kids in inner cities are better served, to make sure the, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's not what this is about. This is about passing the American Library Association's effort to silence parents and legislators acting to protect, and school board members and legislators acting to protect the children from the American Library Association. It concludes. That law concludes, it's the sponsor's intent that the legislation protect the freedom of New Jersey's residents to read, for school libraries and public libraries to acquire and maintain materials without external limitations, like the United States Supreme Court. To recognize the school library media specialists and librarians are trained to curate and develop collections, and make sure the kids get social justice and microaggression training and pronouns while the parents aren't aware. Okay, that's what it says, and protect them and librarians from unnecessary, unwarranted harassment and defamation for performance of their duties. No, let's not say that they're, can't use that G word. Later we'll see that the G word is used by a United States Senator in a Senate hearing. So we have backing us, parents, to say that they are using the G word. I will show you later. What's left out is what's going on and why. What's going on in this bill, it's an improved version of a previous bill that failed. It was called the Right to Read Act. It specifically incorporated by reference into law the Library Bill of Rights. Such legislation has already become law in Illinois, the home state of ALA. So the Library Bill of Rights got incorporated into state law. The Library Bill of Rights, as it turns out, is just an aspirational creed, as a historian I think named Shirley Wygand called it. And a court said that it means nothing because it just applies to librarians and them working in the libraries. It doesn't mean anything. But I'll show you later that the Library Bill of Rights added the word age to it to make it age discrimination to keep kids from it seeing anything over 50 years ago. And it came from a radical 60s a guy named Edgar Friedenberg, and they decided to just add it in there. This is at the time when everybody wanted to, children should have the same rights as adults. It's the children have the same rights as adults, people. That's in the Library Bill of Rights. That's what they made into the Right to Read Act. Well, they got rid of the wording Library Bill of Rights in the Freedom to Read Act, but they put all of its tenets into the Freedom to Read Act. It's very clever. All right? And in the Freedom to Read Act in Illinois, they actually make it so that if you don't give these kids diverse and inclusive books, which we now know means section appropriate, then you will lose your funding. You will not be eligible for state funding grants unless they adopt the Library Bill of Rights. It's unbelievable. Okay? You can read the article, Governor Pritzker, that family. He's the one that funds a lot of the trans movement. Not he, but the family. The same law was proposed in New Jersey as the, well, I think I just said all this. All right? It's either a super coincidence that state legislators designed a detailed, comprehensive bill that we just discussed that exactly mirrors the goals of the American Library Association and its subgroups like the Unite Against Book Bans and Every Library, where the connection to the ALA is hidden, by the way. Or the legislation itself was written by a political advocacy group from Chicago, Illinois. That group happens to be, the ALA is losing members precisely because it has certain political agenda that no longer adheres to American standards. The Freedom to Read Act, if applied to New Jersey or other states, will take the views of librarians in Chicago, Illinois, and make them nationwide. Who wants that? Nobody wants it. The law makes it illegal for parents to challenge any materials whatsoever in schools. Illegal to challenge materials. What happened to the First Amendment? Right to seek redress of your government. What happened to your state constitutions that probably give you substantially similar rights? Right? And if they do, they're punished with lawsuits. It's relevant to know, here we go, that the American Library Association trains librarians to file defamation suits against parents to silence them and drain them up to $500,000. I mean, this is going to teach people not to challenge books, right? That's the message of the Freedom to Read Act. We're going to sue you into oblivion. All right, now how do I know this? Well, because of a Freedom of Information Act request on a library from December 17, 2013, when the American Library Association did some training. And here's the page from the training. I do have the whole thing somewhere. If I don't, you can contact me. And here's the page of the training. And right here at the bottom of this training, like ALA will provide support and get applicable laws, get the ALA policies. We'll do the analysis. They're going to really help you out. Whatever. It says defamation attorney will cost up to $500,000. That's why the defamation provision is in the law. Because the ALA put it there, because they train librarians to do it. I'm involved in one of these cases right now, been involved in 2 others. Other parents are involved in it right now. Amanda is suing parents right now, lost 3 times, but it's still being fun to keep doing it. This is what it's all about. It is an effort to silence parents and fool legislators into going along with this because they don't understand it. Hopefully you people are starting to understand this. So let's look specifically at what laws these things violate in the next 10 minutes. And then we'll go to question. Well, they violate the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, right? Because you're going to violate your freedom of speech. You can't seek redress of the government, right? The U.S. Constitution was written to protect we the people from governmental overreach. The Freedom to Read Act was written to protect the government from claimed overreach of the people. The Freedom to Read Act is unconstitutional. Look, it also violates Article 1 of the New Jersey Constitution. You in your own states, look at your state constitutions, okay? You probably have something like this. The people have the right freely to make known their opinions to their representatives and petition for redress of grievances. Right? You can do this. It's in your Constitution, too. This Right to Read Act blows this out of the water. Who's going to file anything, seek any redress, if you're going to get sued and lose attorney's fees because your camera zoomed in on you with scary music? It violates Article 4 of the New Jersey Constitution. Look, it says the legislature shall not pass any private, special, or local laws. And look, a law that I'm guessing, I'm not an expert in this area. I'm guessing that this is a private law because the American Library Association is pushing the states nationwide, the same stuff nationwide. The legislature shall not pass any private or law, ready for this, providing for the management and control of free public schools. If this Freedom to Read Act is a special or private law that I think it is, it does provide for the management and control of free schools. This will blow it out of the water. See if your state constitutions have something substantially similar. Okay? All right. Okay, you should read this. Freedom to defend enables core principles. Okay. It also violates the Board of Education versus PICO case. This case is your friend. The American Library Association likes to cast it as their friend by saying that it protects books from being removed because of the ideas they contain. Well, it also says that you can remove educationally unsuitable or pervasively vulgar books. Now, every book contains ideas. So every book, you can argue, can't be removed because of the ideas it contains. Nothing can be removed. Now, wait a minute. Supreme Court cases may not be looked at in a way that makes them useless. That's what the American Library Association does. It says if the book has any idea, you can't remove it. So books like Genderqueer get to stay. They completely ignore educationally unsuitable or pervasively vulgar. That's what's going on here. I urge you all to read this article by Rita Cogenson. She is a professor at the University of Houston. In this article, she describes how the American Library Association made up the concept of the freedom to read, precisely to deprive parents and school boards of their rights. That's why we're all here in the first place. They wanted to take parents' rights away and school board rights to determine what's rights for children and set themselves up. And here we are 50 years later, we're about to pass it into law into states, what they wanted. Okay? So you read more about what I say here because I use PICO to discuss everything in that law. For example, it says it's necessary and proper for school librarians to acquire and maintain materials without external limitations. False. The PICO case is the limitation on the content of school libraries. Thanks to the PICO case, books have been successfully removed from public schools. The passage of this act would put an end to PICO. All right? So read this stuff when you get a chance.
Dan, do you have time for some questions?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going to take your screen or your computer screen away. Is that all right?
You can take my computer screen away. Can I show this 1 6-minute video?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Let me know if it's making noise. This is the crux of the problem, said by United States Senator Mike Lee.
In a school, then being exposed to certain kinds of subjects and books. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rono. Senator Lee. I'm going to be showing a video clip in just a second, but at the outset of this, I want to make clear, I think nearly every American could agree that parents have some legitimate interest in what their child reads or is taught or otherwise exposed to about sex. I think it's very, very difficult for anyone to disagree with that. That being the case, I think we need to proceed with this conversation with that backdrop and that understanding. I'm going to play a video clip right now. The video clip is from Deborah Caldwell Stone. She's the legal counsel for the American Library Association. Here's what she has to say on some of these topics that deal not with book banning. Because no one here has banned any book. You can still get these books anywhere you want them. The question isn't whether to ban them. The question is whether they should be included in curriculum or in a school library. A library or a school curriculum, by definition, will be finite. There are a finite number of books that you can put in there. The question is which books should be included and which should not. Let's hear what Ms. Deborah Caldwell Stone has to say on this topic.
But ultimately, we found that the thing that needs to happen most, and it needs to happen before these bills are introduced, is sustained messaging that reframes this issue, that takes it away from the idea that these are inappropriate for minors or sexually inappropriate for minors, and promote them as diverse materials and programming that are about inclusion, fairness, and protection of everybody's right to see themselves and their families reflected in the books in the public library.
Okay, so I think what we saw here right now is someone saying the quiet part out loud. Acknowledging what the goal is. There is a goal here, and the goal is to sexualize children, to provide minors with sexually explicit material, and then hide this content from the parents. Hide it by changing the messaging, avoiding the heat by saying, no, these are not the droids you're looking for. This is not about sexually explicit content. This is about equality. This is about justice. This is about what's right and wrong. It has nothing to do with sex. Well, of course that's what someone would do if they were grooming your child, if someone were trying to sexualize your child. And make no mistake, that is what's happened. You see, there has been something that has happened in the last few years. During COVID, a lot of kids had online school. And parents were able to observe in the classroom in ways that they haven't been in the past. Observe what was being taught, how it was being taught. And it's awakened something significant among parents throughout America. And that's why you've got groups that are standing up, groups of parents, places across the country, including Utah, like Utah Parents United, the American Accountability Foundation, and Ms. Neely's group, Parents Defending Education. They're providing parents with the tools they need and the information that they desire about how best to protect their kids from inappropriate things that they may be being taught or maybe being given at the school where they spend most of the best hours of most days of the week throughout the school year every year. Now, one of the explicit excerpts read by Mr. Eden just a few minutes ago and presented to this committee is from All Boys Aren't Blue, a book available without restriction in at least one Utah junior high school, attended by children ages 13 to 15, and at least 5 Utah high schools. In 3 Utah high schools, the book was available to children over 16. Now, remember, from what was shared with us from Mr. Eden, this book has some really graphic, sexually explicit stuff. This is pornographic. This is obscene. It's certainly not appropriate for children. And it is, no matter what else you think about it, it is something that is sexual in nature. And I really do think very few, if any, American could reasonably disagree with the statement that parents have an interest in what their children are taught when it comes to sex. And so the moment parents take reasonable steps to protect their children and lawmakers honor those efforts to protect their children from exposure, then all of a sudden we've got a problem. And then the left and Vice President Harris cry book ban. Even though all of these books are still available. You can still buy them, all of them. On Amazon, you can still buy them, all of them, all over the place. You can't, by the way, buy Randy Anderson's book, When Harry Became Sally, on Amazon. That's been taken down from Amazon. But the point is this. This is not a ban. This is about schools deciding what's appropriate for school children. And sexually explicit, obscene, pornographic material isn't appropriate. And many parents are legitimately concerned about that. So I'm concerned about this in a variety of respects. And I'd just like to ask the question, Mr. Eden, is placing common sense age restrictions on pornographic content or removing sexually explicit books from school curriculum and school libraries, is that book banning? And does that carry any ramifications for what we would talk about in terms of the First Amendment, in terms of book banning in the First Amendment sense? No, sir. No, it does not. And why is that? Why is that not book banning? Why does that not offend the First Amendment in any way, shape, or form? It's a question of community curation, and no student is actually blocked from acquiring the book in a broader sense. So if you're providing content to a child, if spoken to a child by you, by the school, if that would constitute, in some jurisdictions, in some circumstances, a crime or a tort, you've got a problem.
All right. Okay. I'm ready for questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that. It was a wonderful presentation and a lot of information to digest. So thank you so much. I have a couple questions. So here in Maryland, there is a bill, and it's some variation of the Right to Read Act. And the biggest point of contention that we are facing from certain legislators is that this doesn't affect school libraries. It only affects public libraries. So the problem that I have with that is that it doesn't specifically say that school libraries are affected or not affected. So how can we be sure that in this piece of legislation, school libraries are not in fact affected, and it's just public libraries? Should we ask for an amendment, or how do you think we should go about that?
Well, I'd have to read it, but the law would have to say just public libraries. Look, the law that we just looked at right now talked about school libraries, then it talked about public libraries. It made that distinction. So it made it explicit. So that's probably the way that it should go. That, if it says just libraries, it could be any libraries. So it needs to be explicit, or it needs to carve out an exception for the school libraries if that's what you want.
Okay. So you would just recommend taking a look at the bill and having specific explicit instructions that it's only for this bill is only for public libraries.
Yeah.
Okay. Another person from Maryland chimed in and said that she did read school libraries in the bill. So it's confusing though, because we had our library. Well, let's say that there were people that have been talking to our legislators saying that no, it does not affect school libraries. But even though, as Susie is saying in the bill, it does indicate that school libraries are affected.
Mm-hmm. You have to look at the wording specifically. You can't just say, "Oh, the bill is up, I have to go defend it." You have to actually read it and go through it, like I did in this thing. I went sentence by sentence and then analyzed it compared to PICO and other cases. That's what you have to do, because they put these sentences in there for a reason, usually to trick you. But you have to read every line and make sure you understand every line and what it's there for. So that, you want to send this stuff to me, and I'll read it too. Maybe I shouldn't say it. I'll get 50 different things to do. But I can read. Look, I've been doing this for almost 25 years. I can read this stuff and see where they've hidden the terms of art, the equity words, the diversity and inclusion, which would maybe everybody would think, well, yeah, that's okay. But I know how these librarians think. It's not okay. So maybe I should look at this stuff and tell you what I think.
I would love to be able to send you that bill. Yeah. But I would encourage everybody. On the call. I mean, we have a state legislative committee, and for those of you who don't maybe have a state legislative committee, who aren't on top of this maybe as much, I would really encourage you to look at proposed legislation that does affect libraries, because as Dan indicated, this is not going to end in Illinois or New Jersey. This is going to spread across the entire United States. I'm surprised we haven't been seeing it in other, in more and more states. But here in Maryland, it's very real. We are told that it has a high chance of passing, and in that situation, our local school boards would be overridden, and so this bill would override any decisions that were made at the school board level. So, for example, in my county, there was recently a policy passed that stated that sexually explicit material cannot be allowed in school libraries. It was a very, very simple policy saying that cannot happen in school libraries. But this bill would override that school policy, because it's a state law that overrides a county policy.
Yep. And one more thing, by the way, another thing I didn't get to in the talk is that there's codes of ethics that are written for school boards. And those codes of ethics say things like, I'll read from the New Jersey: "I will refuse to surrender my independent judgment to special interest or partisan political groups." Well, the American Library Association is the ultimate partisan political group with a gigantic amount of control over schools, as I show in this document that, it's going to take a long time to go through. So you can maybe even use your laws pertaining to ethics codes, because it's not possible for your boards of education to sit back and allow the American Library Association to control everything as they do, especially under this law, if they have an ethics code that says you can't allow this. No special interest or partisan political groups. That's what the ELA is.
Yeah. Okay, great. One other question: is this only for libraries, or does this include what's considered curriculum? In Virginia, Governor Youngkin made an executive order against sexually explicit and obscene curriculum. However, libraries were an exception.
Well, look, it depends on what the law says. This law pertains to school libraries and public libraries and didn't mention anything about curriculum. That said, your teachers can use whatever's in that library. So their curriculum can have whatever they want, because the librarians often support the teachers with getting books for them and so on and so forth. You need to have policy that prevents your librarians from getting pervasively vulgar or educationally unsuitable material. And don't follow this Freedom to Read Act law. It's not the Freedom to Read Act. It's the Freedom to Control Your Community Act.
Yeah. Okay. What would your response be? I think the biggest point of contention that we receive, and the biggest debate that the big question that we get is, what makes you qualified? Why do your parental rights kind of supersede my parental rights? Like, if I think a book should be available in schools, what makes you come along and say we want that book, removed from the schools? Like, why do you get to choose what my child gets to see?
The American Library Association uses that argument almost every single time, besides the argument that you're racist or you're homophobic.
It's not an argument.
That's what they do. So the other one is, who the hell are you as a parent to say what goes on in the school? The issue isn't what goes on, what I say, right? A parent is allowed to seek redress of the government and go to the school and have them review a book under a policy. It's the school that then acts to review the book under the policy and act therefrom. It's the school acting. There's never a parent that can get a book ever removed from any school. The schools end up deciding that by following their policy, essentially. Look, even the head of the ALA, that Judith Krug I told you about, said that even in the rare case where a book doesn't meet a school selection policy, and I'm going to quote her now, get it out of there. Even she said that. Is she a censor? Right? Did somebody go up to her and say, how come you have a right to say what goes and what doesn't? Just not what's going on here. The school has the right to make those determinations, and parents have the right to let the schools know if they want them to reconsider a book, or if the superintendent might want to consider on his own to remove it under the PICO case, as happens. So those are specious arguments that are just designed to confuse you. I hope I just unconfused you.
I think you have. I think you've done a great job at that. So thank you so much. That's all the questions that we have, and we're coming up against time anyway. So thank you so much. This was very well attended, and it will also be available on our member exclusive page, so people will be able to watch it at their leisure.
But this problem is all over the United States.
Yeah.